Hello and welcome to the Global View on this Tuesday. I'm Andrew Gagan. Thanks for being with us. Well, let's take a look at what happened overnight. Well, not a lot really, because both the US and UK markets were closed for holidays. So the focus being on European stocks, they were subdued but edged higher, with investors taking a cautious stance ahead of this week's inflation data in both the Eurozone and the US. The Pan-European Stock 600 index closed around 1/3% higher to sit just below its all-time high hit earlier this month. Canada's main stock index rose as higher commodity prices boosted resource shares. Well, inflation will be the key data for markets to watch this week, with the US Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's preferred inflation measure, expected to be steady month on month. Markets will also be attentive of Fed speak, with at least 8 Fed officials due to speak this week after the Memorial Day break. Figures for inflation in the Eurozone are also due, and economists believe an expected tick up to 2.5% should not stop the European Central Bank from easing policy next week. Markets have implied an 88% chance of an easing to 3.75% at its June meeting. And Eurozone government bond yields fell after ECB officials said they've room to cut interest rates as inflation slows. French central bank chief saying, barring a surprise, the first rate cut in June is a done deal. But afterwards, we have several degrees of freedom. And ECB chief economist Philip Lane saying keeping rates overly restrictive for too long could push inflation below target over the medium term. This comes amid more signs of German economic weakness, with business surveys showing morale stagnating in May, suggesting the recovery of Germany's economy this year will be slow. Well, the US dollar has held steady but is on track for its first monthly loss this year. The Aussie trading at 66.6 US cents. Let's get a little more stock specific now, with a focus on a French logistics company and why perhaps we should consider adding it to our portfolio. Andrew Brown joining us from East 72. Andrew, good morning. Good to catch up with you again. I've just been running through what we're seeing out of Europe at the moment. Before we get into your specifics that you want to talk about this morning, what are your observations about what you're seeing in the European economy, and I guess how that's affecting some of those corporate earnings?
Yeah, my observation, Andrew, is that certain countries in Europe are, finding things a little bit more difficult than others. It's very industry based. Most of the companies that we've got stock holdings in have actually reported pretty respectable earnings. Remember, it's been European earnings season for calendar 2023 and their AGM seasons pretty recently. So it really depends what industry you're in. Luxury, if you have a look at luxury, for example, that's been really it's been really up and down, depending on, to be blunt, how well you manage your business. In certain of the auto areas, you've had downgrades, only minor ones though, from sort of VW Group, from Porsche at the higher end of that. So it's fairly sort of sketchy. It's not necessarily across the board. It does depend on industry and how you're managing your business.
Well, let's check out what you're keeping an eye on now. Now, you always come to us with an interesting stock. The one you've got at the moment is Bolloré. What is in logistics? Why has this come to your attention?
Okay, well, Bolloré's its logistics business is only pretty small now, because it's sold its 2 major logistics businesses, which are in Africa and most recently in Europe. So it's got about 11 billion euros for those, which means it's got 6 billion euros plus of cash. Now, most people find Bolloré just a complete headache, mainly because Bolloré controls itself. It's a bit like Soul Patts and Brickworks in Australia, if you want to look at it like that. Bolloré is 67% owned by Compagnie de l'Aude. I covered that on Global View in July last year. But Bolloré owns 35% of Aude, so people get really confused. And what you've got to do is you've actually got to cancel out the cross shareholdings between the two. If you don't, the market cap looks like about 17.5 billion euros. If you do, the market cap falls to about 7 and a bit billion. It's really got four groups of assets. The first is 18% of Universal Music Group, which we've dealt with on Global View before. The shareholding's worth about 9 billion euros. Secondly, it's got 30% of Vivendi, which we've also dealt with as well. That shareholding's worth about 3.1 billion euros, but Vivendi's rapidly undervalued and is breaking itself up early next year. It's got 6.2 billion of cash. Then it's got some odds and sods businesses, which is one of the largest oil logistics businesses in Europe. It's got a small film and packaging business, which was the original Bolloré. It's got a business, if you walk through the RATP access gates on the metro in France, that's run by IER. And then the interesting thing is it has a battery and electric mobility business, which no Tesla cultist has ever looked at. And yet it's got unique technology that is arguably way ahead of others. And it's going to sort of spend more time focusing on that.
So, what are you watching for then, just in terms of particularly, I guess, that battery and electric mobility business?
Yeah. What we're looking at, Andrew, is basically what's Bolloré going to do with its cash? And it's made some announcements in recent times in tandem with the French government about building basically two lithium metal polymer battery businesses, a small one in Brittany. And if you look at Bolloré, Bolloré's history is in Brittany, and it's extremely loyal to that region. It's where Vincent Bolloré, the patriarch, is from. The other much bigger plant they're potentially building is in Mulhouse, which is near the German border. And the idea there is to partner with someone else, most likely BMW, and also with the French government, and also to ensure that if they build this factory, it's got significant orders, because the factory is going to cost 2 billion euros, and Bolloré's not going to fund all of that, and its shareholders would go mad if they did. So that it's likely that there'll be a group of announcements if this is going to go ahead over the next few months. And that could really provide some blue sky that sort of Bolloré hasn't necessarily had. In addition to that, things are getting better on their business. Their business is called Blue Solutions. You might remember 2 years ago, their blue buses were pulled off the road in Paris, mainly because the batteries caught fire. And so the bus caught fire, and they've now just been put back on with new style batteries and new innovations. And obviously that's needed given the Olympics coming up. So RATP, the French public transport networks, put those back on. So things are starting to get a bit more interesting on that part of the business, which most analysts give no value to whatsoever. And they don't put a big value on the oil logistics business either. So they're fringe things, but we'll start to add.
What though of the split of Vivendi, given its stake there?
Yeah. For the split of Vivendi, Andrew, I think it's very clear that Bolloré are keeping some of their powder dry. There are several really excellent assets within Vivendi. There's obviously another 10% of Universal Music Group. That's going into sort of the investment pot of the split. Canal Plus is basically making a large takeover in Africa at the moment of MultiChoice, which is one of the largest free-to-air but over-the-air streaming businesses, which is obviously dominated by sport and football. So they're bidding for that. They're over 40% now. Havas is one of the world's 6 largest advertising agencies, and then there's publishing as well. So we think that Bolloré are going to keep quite a significant amount of powder dry to reinvest in one or more of those businesses and backstop them, and potentially even acquire very specific control of one or more of those businesses. And so that's going to happen towards the end of this year or early next year.
What about a shareholders likely to benefit here, just in terms of some cash back, do you think?
Absolutely. Last year, Bolloré bought back about 8% of the adjusted capital, or 3.4% of the total. It was at about $6 a share. They don't have a major buyback on at the moment, but we think that that's going to change as time goes on, because both Bolloré and its parent, Compagnie de l'Aude, are significantly undervalued. To give you an idea, I have a valuation for Bolloré of about 15 euros a share, and the stock's trading at 6.20. So, I think that the company's worth, it's trading at a 60% discount to what is not an unrealistic asset-based value based on the share prices of Vivendi and Universal Music and what they could be worth. It's also playing around a little bit. You've got to remember, Vincent Bolloré is one of Europe's best deal makers and capital managers. I mean, that's how much of the money got into Bolloré from what he did in the late 70s and through the early 80s with raids on Lazard and things like that. He just bought 5% of Rubis, which is a listed energy storage and distribution business, and there's quite a few other 5% shareholders. So he's having a little play in a few things, and even though he's not on the board and he's not the chair anymore, you don't think he doesn't speak to his son Cyril, who is the chairman of Bolloré itself. They might collapse the group structure as well, because there are too many sort of double discounts within the group. So that's a possibility, but I think they'll wait till after the Vivendi breaks to do that.
All right, but I'm assuming then you're looking to get in now because you're seeing good value there, and particularly those catalysts that could close that valuation gap.
Absolutely, Andrew. We've been shareholders in Bolloré ever since we started the Dynasty Trust in sort of late 22, early 23. It's an absolute core holding for us, as is O'Day. We have to be careful we don't have too much exposure to the whole Bolloré group. But it's, for a defensive play, when you've got that much cash, you've got an amazing business in Universal Music, which backstops the value of the group, and you've got lots of optionality with an absolutely brilliant deal maker still available to the group. Then, we think it's a really safe play with massive upside optionality.
Andrew, great to get your view as usual on Bolloré. Thanks for joining us from East 72.
Excellent. Bonsoir.
Or bon matin. All right, now just before we go, let's take a look at where we're likely to get going this morning. Yeah, look, marginally higher, as you can see with SPI futures there, given, of course, we had no guidance from the US market, also UK market closed as well, so we're going our own way today. All right, stay with us. The Open just a couple of minutes away.